So when it comes to pronunciation, it's not about sounding like a native speaker. It's actually more about being able to have people understand you when you're talking. You could have perfect grammar, perfect wording, but if your pronunciation isn't right, people still won't know what you're saying. It's kind of like if I said, "Whoa, Chang Chang, chu shui jiao." You wouldn't really know what I was saying, right? When I was just trying to say, "我常常吃水饺." Okay, so again, the grammar was perfect. The wording was perfect, but I said it with the wrong pronunciation and with the wrong tones. And because of it, it made it so you couldn't really understand what I was saying. Now, in English, we don't have tones like Chinese does, but what we do have are vowel sounds and consonant sounds. And if you say those vowel sounds the wrong way or blend them with another sound, it makes it so we can't understand you. Just like if I said something in Chinese with the wrong tones or the wrong pronunciation. That's why pronunciation is so key. And it's because of that this next package will have a huge emphasis on pronunciation, which means it'll include a lot of drills and practices that will allow you to develop not only the mouth strength to make those noises, but also the muscle memory so that you can make the right sound every time. But part of making those sounds is first being able to recognize them. And the best way to do that is first listen to me when I'm saying it, and then stop it and record yourself saying the exact same sentence or phrase. Then listen to yourself, and then play the video where I'm talking again, and listen. What's different? Find the sounds that are not quite right, and take those parts and try and mimic it the way that I'm saying it, and that'll allow you to get closer. And as you consistently practice that, your ear will be trained, and you'll be able to recognize those subtle differences. Now, this step is so important, and you want to make sure that you do it right. And what I mean by that is don't just record yourself, mimic it, and move on to the next one. What you want to do is really listen. Is it the same? What's different? Listen to the noises. Because if you can't recognize those sounds, how are you going to mimic them? If you can't mimic them, you can't improve your pronunciation. So the first step to pronunciation is first being able to train your ear, hearing those sounds, and then mimicking them. We have to listen first before we can mimic. Now, what happens if you recognize the difference? You know you're not saying it the way that I'm saying it, but you can't make the sound that I'm making. What do you do then? That's where the next part comes in. Now, if you can't replicate a sound, you want to pay attention to the shape of my mouth. And what I mean by that is, what are my lips doing? What is my tongue doing? What are my teeth doing? What is my voice doing? What is my throat doing? If you pay attention to those subtle differences, that helps a ton when it comes to mimicking or replicating a sound. Now, the next key thing you got to keep in mind when you're practicing pronunciation is even if you're trying to mimic the shape of my mouth or trying to recognize the sounds, there are going to be some sounds that you won't be able to pronounce right out of the gate. Even if you know what to do, you won't be able to do it. And the reason for that isn't because you're not good at English. It's because your mouth doesn't have the strength, the muscle strength, to actually make that noise. A great example of this is when I was learning Chinese, I could not make the noise yu. Every time I tried to make that noise, I would say you, and that's because this noise doesn't exist at all in English. And so I just couldn't do it until finally, after practicing, my mouth became strong enough to go yu. And I noticed when I said like anything that had that yu noise in it, my lips were really sore. And over time, my mouth got strong enough that my lips weren't sore anymore. But that's what I'm talking about, is there are some noises in English that your mouth isn't used to making. And so it'll take time to develop the strength before you can finally make that noise. And so as you're going through the practice and you're like, I'm trying to make the noise and I can't do it, it isn't because you don't have the ability to learn a language. It's just your mouth is still building the strength to make that sound. If you keep that in mind, it'll help you stick with it. And eventually you actually will make the noise. And that's a really cool feeling. So remember, the keys to mastering pronunciation is first, listening and paying attention to what's the difference between what you're saying and what's a native speaker saying. And if there is a difference, changing it so it matches what the native speaker is doing. The second is, if you can't match it and you're still having a hard time, pay attention to what the mouth is doing, what the teeth are doing, what's the tongue doing, the voice, and mimicking that. And three, if you still can't replicate that sound, even though you're trying to copy the mouth and you recognize that there's a difference, It's because there's probably some muscles in your mouth that aren't strong enough yet. It doesn't mean that you're not good at the language. It just means that you need to strengthen those muscles first before you're going to be able to replicate that sound. If you keep these concepts in mind, your pronunciation will improve dramatically, and it will help a ton. And pronunciation is key. And if you're able to pronounce things well, it's going to help people understand you better, which means you're going to be able to learn the language much more efficiently and much faster.